Capitalism has historically been resilient. Capitalism has historically been resilient in previous times, up against the ropes. It bounces back. How has it been able to do it? Can it do it now? Or is this economic crisis something seminal in the history of capitalism?
A very wise man who's taught me a lot over the years once said, no system disappears until and unless all of its available means of survival are exhausted. And I think that's a very wise summary, not just about capitalism, but about all the systems. I also think that you never know these things in advance. I believe in human wisdom, but I also recognize its limits. We won't know what the last struggle of capitalism is until we're done with it, until it's over, and we can look back and reach that decision. So yes, capitalism has bounced back from many threats, many crises. That was true of slavery before it. That was true of feudalism before it. I do think we are now at a very profound crisis of capitalism. It is more global than it has ever been before because of the linkages among the different parts. It is more subject to the instant awareness of the mass of people of what's going on. I don't want to overdo it, but things like the internet and Facebook and Twitter and all that are having their effect. It is now possible for movements in action to send the kinds of photographs you referred to before instantaneously around the world so that everybody can see who's pepper spraying whom in a grotesquely inappropriate way within minutes of the event itself. That is very powerful. The internet is an end run around the controlled media, at least so far, and that creates opportunities that didn't exist before. So I think capitalism has very basic challenges. Let's remember, we are now in the second major collapse of capitalism in 75 years. The last one was the 1930s. The National Bureau of Economic Research, the official agency which monitors and declares recessions and so on, counts between the end of the Great Depression, 1941, and the beginning of this one, 2007, 11 downturns. This is a fundamentally unstable system now experiencing the second worst one in a century. This is enough evidence to suggest, uh-oh, that this is a level of instability of our economic system that is going to make a large number of people scratch their heads and say, a system as unstable as this, which keeps visiting upon us these kinds of crises this often, is a system that ought to be questioned and challenged. No one can tell at this stage whether the current challenge that's 2 months old is going to mature. But I will tell you this, anything that can have this kind of growth in 2 months, this kind of social impact in 2 months, this ability to overcome all kinds of barriers to movement from below in 2 months is something to watch.
To talk about Europe a little bit again, you've commented that the left parties, these traditional social democratic parties, are facing extinction, that they're committing suicide. Could you flesh that out, please?
Yeah, in countries like Greece, Spain, and elsewhere, socialist governments who often came to power on a platform that said, we will never impose austerity on the working class because it's an outrage, get into office and then proceed to impose the austerity they ran against. You have it, for example, in that iconic socialist dynasty, the Papandreou family, grandfather, father, and now son, Yorgos, who just lost his position a week or so ago. You have the Socialist Party committing suicide, I believe, politically. I don't think it will recover for decades, if ever, in a place like Greece, which has a strong and militant socialist tradition. You see the collapse of the Socialist Party in Germany, which was a major party, was the government. Before Merkel, that was the Schroeder government, was a socialist government. They are now much, much weaker than they were before. You have the splitting of the left wing of the Socialist Party in Germany, and I use that as an example. breaking away and doing something that was unthinkable in European politics. The Lafontaine, that's the leader there, Oscar Lafontaine, broke away from the Socialist Party. He was the leader just under Schroeder, so he was the heir apparent. Broke away, took the left wing of the Socialist Party, and merged with the Communist Party of Eastern Germany, the ruling party there when they were still in power, to create a new party which appealed to the German people by giving itself the name to make itself unmistakable. Die Linke in Germany, in English, means the left. The name of the party is the left. Hello, tells you where they are. And they're a critical party. One of their slogans is Germany can do better than capitalism. They are showing that they're going to be the new party of the left as the Socialist Party shrinks between those who leave it to be Greens, those who leave it to become conservative, and those who leave it to go to the left. What's left is not much of a socialist party. So I think that's another sign of fundamental changes in the socioeconomic system, because the old political meanings are not what they were. The old political loyalties are being destroyed. New political loyalties, new political parties are being established. In a number of European countries, you have parties which call themselves anti-capitalist parties. That's new development. Even the socialists didn't dare say that. Anti-capitalist, to underscore that their programs are for a new system. So I think we're at the early stages in Europe of a new political situation, just as we are in the United States. They're a bit further along because they have more of a tradition, and they didn't see the atrophy of their left-wing organizations over the last 50 years. Their trade unions are stronger than us. They have existing and powerful socialist and communist parties in many countries, and so they have more of the networks in place. We are starting more from scratch in this country, and that gives them certain strengths, but also weaknesses, just like our having to start from scratch is a weakness, but that also gives us strength, and we'll see how this evolves, and we're seeing also more connections between the United States and European leftists. For example, having come back from Germany 2 weeks ago, I went to a conference on a specific subject in Berlin. But all the people wanted to hear from myself and the 4 or 5 other Americans who were part of this conference, they didn't want us to give our papers that we have. They wanted to talk about Occupy Wall Street. All the questions. When I went, I did a television interview in Berlin. That's all they wanted me to talk about. They wanted me to talk about Wall Street and what was happening in the other cities of America. What does this movement mean? So I can assure you that the Europeans, the left for sure, but even other parts of the European political spectrum, are glued in to this challenge to American capitalism, which is how they see it, because they think and know that their futures are also wrapped up in how this movement evolves.
But as you know, there are many currents in the Occupy Wall Street movement. I was talking to one of the many spokespeople down at Zuccotti Park, and he told me that he was advocating for a better capitalism. We can do better. We can change the tax code. The rich can pay their fair share of taxes. So there are different currents coursing through this movement.
Yes, and it could not be otherwise in a movement that's 2 months old, that's just finding its footing, that's gathering those stalwarts who are going to be the core of it. I think you're going to see many, many diverse tendencies here. To make your point even more strongly, I've encountered people who get very nervous when I start talking about capitalism and the problem of capitalism. They tend to be the older folks, to be honest, and they come from a tradition of radical thinking in America, which prided itself on never raising that question. They were people who worked on the civil rights movement or in favor of gay marriage or a whole host of issues where the feeling was not to bring up the question of capitalism, whatever people thought about it, because it was just too dangerous. It would bring the establishment down on you, it would dilute the movement, it would upset people who weren't ready for that kind of talk. I understand that. I didn't agree with it, but I understand the perspective. Those people are still with us. They didn't disappear, and their concerns and anxiety about this are still in evidence. I think the wind is changing, and I think they'll see that now capitalism finally can be talked about. The Cold War is not only over, but behind us by 20 years so we can finally find the courage to be debating our economic system the way we should have all along. And so that will change, but that's a process that is active inside that movement and will continue to be. There are folks who believe that the beginning and end of our difficulties lie with the Federal Reserve. If we can only get rid of the Federal Reserve or transform the Federal Reserve, then our problems will be solved, and so on. That's normal in this situation. You know, the literacy, the economic and literacy for sure of the American people has been underdeveloped for a long time. I'm finding that half of what I do as I travel around the country is basically teach economics to people who want to understand this. And you know, as a teacher, the best situation is when your students want to get what you have to teach. And I think people are realizing they have to understand the economics because it's crunching in on them. And I have a chance to give an explanation. But if you have an underdeveloped literacy, then your economic analysis in the middle of a crisis is going to be all over the place. And I think you're seeing that.